The New Orleans Saints defense absolutely dominated all day, and it left leaving more questions than answers for training camp day 7. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints, as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. We appreciate you very much for being here. On today's episode, we're doing our live breakdown of training camp day 7 here in Irvine, California, as the New Orleans Saints wrap up their big day, final day of pads before they go into their day off. So here's a couple of things that we're going to look at. We're going to dive into some more injuries that have continued to pile up, including now an injury to starting linebacker Demario Davis. How concerned should we be? We'll break all that down. We're going to take a look at Alontae Taylor, who I think is going to be a very different player in 2024 than he was in 2023. We're going to lead everything off with the New Orleans Saints defense, though, absolutely taking it to the New Orleans Saints offense. It was the defense good, or is the offense just struggling? We're going to break all of that down here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much for being an everydayer and for making us your first listen here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. The New Orleans Saints defense was the story of training camp day 7's practice, and in particular the pass rush, which absolutely came to life under the leadership of, again, another strong day and strong showing from newly acquired defensive end and edge rusher Chase Young, who had several different pressures, made several plays in the run game, continues to be an absolute disruption when it comes to that Saints defensive line. He's a revelation for what it is that the New Orleans Saints defense needs, and they are desperate for exactly what it is that he has proven to be able to bring to this team so far. So while that's the positive, the negative that comes with that is watching the New Orleans Saints offense now struggle more times than not, particularly when it comes to containing the New Orleans Saints pass rushers. And it is the classic question that you have to ask yourself every single training camp. When one unit is performing well, is it because that unit is performing well, or is it because the unit that's supposed to stop it is underperforming? And so it's all of those types of sort of negotiations that you have to make with yourself, either as a fan, as media, or as a coach, right? When you're trying to evaluate, or an evaluator of any kind, trying to evaluate this talent. And I would say this, if the New Orleans Saints had to field a team this coming weekend, I would be severely concerned about their offensive line. But they don't have to field a team this weekend. I think any offensive line that, if they had to be fielded for a regular season game this weekend, would be in dire straits. So let's wait and see how things go over the course of the next few weeks. But definitely when we look at where sort of the starting place is for this New Orleans Saints offensive line and what it has to grow from, I think there's a lot of space in between where they are now and where their ceiling is expected to be. So we'll see if those things end up getting adjusted or getting better as they go on. But the New Orleans Saints defensive line is not taking it easy on this New Orleans Saints offensive line either. Not only did Chase Young have a big day, but Carl Granderson continued to get into the backfield and make plays. We watched Payton Turner get into the back at one point and get a strip sack on Spencer Rattler. Just as he was rearing back to throw, he knocked the football out of his hands. We also saw Nico Lalos walk an offensive lineman back right into Nathan Peterman, and Nathan Peterman ended up going down hard from that. That ended up, casting a lot of, hey, keep your hands off the quarterback notes and everything. But it was a great play by Nico Lalos in any other sense outside of the training camp environment. And so we saw a lot of these New Orleans Saints defensive linemen stand out. And that's just looking at the guys that came off of the edge. We also had a really good play from Colin Saunders, who ended up sniffing out an outside play that went over to the right sideline that he was able to help to close in on over there out in space, making plays for the big defensive tackle. Nathan Shepard got into the backfield for a couple plays as well. So we've seen a lot of positive for this New Orleans Saints defensive line, more than I think that we've seen in previous training camps. I think in other years, we've sort of been looking at the Saints defensive line this early in training camp and going, well, the pressure and the presence that you were hoping for doesn't really feel like it's there at this time. But right now we're seeing plays made by all these different guys. And I didn't even get to the fact that Isaiah Foskey also had a sack today, got into the backfield a couple of times. He's put together, by the way, a pretty strong camp so far. Isaiah Foskey has. I don't think that anybody has to, go crazy in terms of what the expectations could be there. But Foskey is a guy that I feel like people got very impatient with very quickly, just based on the fact that like what they had seen with Marcus Davenport, the fact that people have already kind of given up on Payton Turner, who really has another year still left to prove himself. And then they just immediately wrote off Isaiah Foskey when he came in and had a very uncharacteristic health issue right when he came into the NFL. And so seeing Foskey now, who has spent time all offseason working with people like Cam Jordan and working with the trainers of Aaron Donald and others, he has already shown you quite a bit all throughout camp here that he could have a bit of an impact. So he's been a lot of fun to watch. And so we saw that now from all over the Saints defensive line here in day 7. And look, there were some good moments from the offensive line and for the offense as well. We had another big screenplay go to Alvin Kamara where he was able to take it for what probably would have been a score. We saw a couple of big plays in the run game as well. A really nice play action connection between Derek Carr and Chris Olave for big yards. Spencer Rattler found Mason Tipton down the right sideline on a big play as well. But for the most part, the bigger plays were the run plays. It wasn't a very successful passing day for the New Orleans Saints. They did get their first interception or throw their first interception of the past few days. There had been a drought on interceptions over the course of the past few days for the Saints defense, where they finally got one as Jake Haener was targeting. It was Kevin Austin over the middle. He was being covered by Shamar Jean-Charles, who tipped the ball up. It bounced off of Kevin Austin, and then Roderick Teamer, the New Orleans native and Saints safety, makes a diving interception on it. So it was the defense's first interception in a few days. So we saw some good things on both sides of the football, but the thing that I tried to really focus in on today was the offensive line versus the defensive line. And right now, it just feels like no contest right now. It feels like it's all the defensive line. So, look, like I mentioned before, it's not like the Saints have to field their offensive line this Sunday. I'll reiterate what it was that Dennis Allen mentioned in Tuesday's or after Tuesday's practice, which is they've only installed so much of the offense so far over on the offensive side of the football. So the defense is kind of getting used to and able to anticipate what it is that they're going to do because they have a very limited playbook so far. All that might be true, but I'm also watching just certainly from a one-on-one, man-to-man kind of perspective. The New Orleans Saints offensive line is simply struggling against the New Orleans Saints defensive line right now. And that is an offensive line that's rotating different players into their first team, that's rotating different players into their second team, all these other things too. So definitely something to keep in mind when it comes to all that. We'll get into some of those rotation details as we wrap up today's show. But I want to jump next, staying over on the defensive side, but I want to go back to the secondary because I think Alontae Taylor is shaping up to be an entirely different player in 2024 than what he showed you he could be in 2023. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. I only use Game Time when it comes to buying tickets to my favorite events, whether those events are sports, music, like concerts and things like that, comedy, theater, whatever event I'm looking for, I immediately go to the Game Time app to find it because tickets actually get cheaper the closer to the time of the event over on Game Time. They have all-in pricing, which means you don't end up being startled by a bunch of hidden fees by the time that you get to the checkout window, and you get to see the view from your seats before you buy your tickets. They make the entire ticket buying experience user-friendly and transparent. They take all the guesswork out of buying tickets. So I would like for you today to head over to Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family. I think Alontae Taylor is going to be a very different player than what you saw in 2023 when he was learning how to play an entirely new position. And we've seen kind of inkling of this all throughout camp so far, but today really kind of felt like a little bit of a coming out party for the New Orleans Saints cornerback. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream, where you can find all of the biggest stories from around the world of sports, brought to you by the local experts that cover the teams and know them the best. You can find it over on the Locked On Sports Today YouTube page and on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Alontae Taylor, drafted the second round a few years ago, was a guy that came in and immediately his rookie season showed you that he has the ability to be a starting NFL corner in the league. Got some reps late in the season over on the outside and absolutely balled out over there. Looked really, really good in those situations when that was after Marshawn Lattimore went down with that lacerated kidney injury. And then after that, you saw Paulson Adebo, who was dealing with a lot of injuries that year as well, missed some time. And so that opened up a lot of opportunity for Alontae Taylor to go out there and prove himself. And prove himself he did. I thought that he had a really spectacular rookie season. But the big question was always, how do you utilize his skill set and simultaneously utilize Marshawn Lattimore's skill set and Paulson Adebo's skill set? And well, we got the answer to that last year back in 2023 when they said, well, we'll just get them all on the field together at the same time. So Marshawn Lattimore was on the outside, Paulson Adebo was on the outside, and then Alontae Taylor, for the first time in his playing career, not just his NFL career, but going back to college as well, he didn't do this very much, ended up playing in the slot. In 2023, he had a fine year. He had his first career interceptions. We got him towards the end of the season. He had his first career interception in that Tampa Bay game up against Baker Mayfield. That's why he calls Baker Mayfield his favorite quarterback on social media whenever he gets a chance. And then he has gone on from, or in addition to that, he was also ranked as one of the NFL's best press corners because he's so incredibly physical at the line of scrimmage. But he wasn't super successful in the slot role, which was to be expected. It was the first time that he'd ever played that role. He only played, I think it was less than 60 snaps. It was definitely less than 60. I'm pretty sure it was less than 40 snaps in the slot during his time at Tennessee with the Volunteers in college. And so it was a lot of learning while doing last year. And now it feels like Alontae Taylor's really, really comfortable in his role and really, really comfortable out on that football field. You're watching him constantly give feedback to the players that are also out there, the younger guys. He is helping guys out on the special team side, like how to set up a gunner, how to, be a jammer, all these other things. Just kind of coaching guys up. He also helped get Kool-Aid McKinstry into place on another rep and things like that. He's just become a really effective and really willing communicator, which is very important for anybody that's playing in the secondary. You have to communicate so much. One of the things that's been really nice about being here throughout this training camp is that our proximity to the field is really, really close. And so even when the music is playing and stuff like that, we can kind of hear some of the communication that's happening. And while a lot of it is, team specific terminology and things like that are the terminology that they use to identify where, the motion is coming from or going, or where the offense is weighted and things like that. It's been interesting just to be able to hear all of it, because it's a lot of them passing players off and letting folks know, I'm not going to be here, or I'm not there, or you, sending to you, all these other things. And so you hear all that communication out on the field, and it's cool to be able to hear that even when like the music's blaring and all that stuff, which challenges them, of course, to be louder, because in that dome environment, that arena environment, you're dealing with crowd noise, you're dealing with music playing up until the snap and all these other things as well. So we're seeing kind of all that. But I think one of the things that kind of made him stand out to me today, and you're seeing this all over probably, is the way that he and wide receiver Chris Olave kind of went back and forth all throughout practice today. Chris Olave and Alontae Taylor matched up for 3 one-on-one reps. And on those 3 one-on-one reps, Alontae Taylor won all 3 of them. And in each of those, whenever he and Chris Olave would be walking back to the huddle, they would be kind of jawing at one another. There was at one point to where, I'm not going to use the exact phrase, but Chris Olave shouted something along the lines of, "Stop holding like a bad word." And so you heard all that kind of verbiage going on in terms of these guys just kind of like giving each other, the business. And then, but in the midst of even all that, they were also explaining to themselves what it was that they were trying to do. Hey, yeah, when you cut this way, I'm trying to do this. Well, when you do that, I'm trying to do this. And so it was also a little bit of like, yeah, they were chirping at one another, but it was a little bit of the iron sharpens iron, right? And it was kind of Alontae Taylor kind of standing on his own and saying, no, I wasn't holding you. Like I did what I needed to do to keep you from catching a football. And he was undefeated up until Chris Olave got his 4th rep in which he ran a nifty slant route and was able to get underneath Alontae Taylor for the catch. And the two congratulated each other and shook hands. But it was cool to see that competition because that's what this training camp has been all about. It's been all about competition. And then Alontae Taylor took that sort of demeanor, that experience, and then turned it into really solid performances all throughout when it came to team drills as well, in terms of his ability to be able to cover and take away the options that he was guarding playing in the slot. So the one-on-ones kind of got his confidence up. And then when he stepped in and played in the slot with Kool-Aid McKinstry on the outside on one side and Paul Adebo on the outside on the other, while Marshawn Lattimore is still not participating in team drills yet or participating in practice yet, although he was off to the side in, sweats and stuff like that watching. Alontae Taylor immediately translated all that confidence that he had built up during the one-on-ones into what he was doing in the slot and had a really, really nice day out in practice. And so I think he's going to be a very different player than what we saw in 2023, where he was maybe a little timid, maybe a little underprepared for what it was that he was being asked to do or was about to be asked to do, or however it is that you want to look at it. All of that just seems to be out of his no longer kind of like blocking up him, right? He's vocal. He's challenging receivers. He's challenging other defenders. He's kind of giving some side coaching. He's giving tips. He's giving feedback. He's talking. He's getting feedback. Like he's just kind of doing all the stuff that you expect to see a guy that knows, that isn't just learning his position anymore, right? A guy that's actually comfortable in what it is that he's trying to execute. And so for me, that has been something that was a big positive today in watching Alontae Taylor's performance. And he wasn't the only one. I thought Kool-Aid McKinstry had a nice day, ended up making a couple plays, including stopping a screenplay at one point. Been able to make a stop on the outside. Ugo Amadi shedding a block to get off of a block to be able to make a stop on a toss over to his side of the field, things like that. So we saw some really good coverage things. We saw a couple of the sacks that I mentioned earlier were probably because of coverage too. Quarterbacks having nowhere to go with the football, all that. So it's just been it was a really good couple of days, or a really good couple of days of padded practices for the defense. But today in particular was kind of the cherry on top, if you will. It was the cap that you can hang on it that says, yeah, they did. This was the defense's day. And it feels like these padded practices for the most part have been defensive days for certain. Coming up next, I want to walk you through some of the attendance notes, some of the injury notes, and what to expect, including a Demario Davis injury, which is something we're going to be watching very, very closely. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The New Orleans Saints right now, 7.5 is the win total for them. You think they're going to win more? You think they're going to win less? You can get in on that over at FanDuel.com. You can also check out week 1, where they're 4.5-point favorites at home going up against the Carolina Panthers to kick off this season. You think they'll be able to clear that and win by 5 or more points? Make sure that you get in on all of that by heading over to FanDuel today, and especially over at FanDuel, because right now, all summer long, they're giving out a free boost or bonus every single day to new customers. So that means that there's something there for you every day for everyone all summer long over at FanDuel. Go and check them out today. That is FanDuel.com so that you can make the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partners of Major League Baseball. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints just cannot curve the injury bug. They just keep getting bit and bit and bit some more when it comes to it. So let's break it all down, especially leading off with a pretty key injury that we're all waiting for more information on here when it comes to star defender, star linebacker, and team leader Demario Davis. Let's break that down here as we continue on with today's episode. Look, Demario Davis had to leave practice early. I believe it was after walkthroughs, a little bit maybe after some of the individual drills, but it was early on in practice, and he left with what Dennis Allen updated later was a hamstring injury. So this is yet another soft tissue injury for the New Orleans Saints. We also saw tight end Tommy Hudson have to leave early. This was after the early portion of the training camp day as well. So not great when it comes to losing now yet another 2 players. So it's now been 7 days and at least an injury a day every single day so far when it comes to New Orleans Saints training camp. And on top of that, I will give some good news. Chris Olave was back and he participated completely in full today. So he was the player that left yesterday, came down hard on his hip towards the end of practice. He was back out there, participated in every single thing. One-on-ones, he did the workout, like the walkthrough, the individual drills, all that kind of stuff, and participated in every single snap of those team drills as well. So some good news there on the injury front, finally, for the New Orleans Saints. But when it came down to today, not only did they lose Demario Davis early in practice, not only did they lose Tommy Hudson early on in practice, but they also did not have Cedric Wilson today. They continued to not have Equanimeous St. Brown today, who's already dealing with an injury, and they didn't have Bub Means today. So there were several players that they ended up not having at the wide receiver position. That's 3 wideouts that were out, and then you had one of them that you almost thought you were going to be without in Chris Olave today. So I think it would be short-sighted to say, well, this is just how training camp goes. Because an injury a day for 7 days straight of training camps is not typical of training camps. I'm not used to talking about an injury every single day. And I mean, sometimes you see those moments where somebody gets a little banged up or something like that, right? And they kind of walk off the field, but then they end up coming back or something like that. But having to completely leave the field and disappear, not return to practice and all this stuff, and then all these other guys that we've seen missing multiple days, this does feel unique and problematic for the New Orleans Saints, who, if they can't field a healthy team, aren't going to win anything in 2024. It doesn't matter how good the scheme is. It doesn't matter how comfortable Derek Carr looks. In fact, at one point, Derek Carr dropped back to throw a pass, and a defender or an offensive lineman, one of the two, ended up stepping on his foot, and he came up hobbling off of his, grabbing at his ankle a little bit, and I was afraid that he was going to end up being out, but he ended up staying in, seemed fine, continued to move well throughout the rest of the day. But it just seems like this team just has, it might not be the greatest analysis in the world, but they just got bad luck right now, it feels like. And it's something that I would love to see them eventually be able to curve, but it just feels like every single day they end up with some kind of injury. Now, I'm sure that they're going to love having a day off tomorrow. On Thursday is their day off. It'll give these guys a lot of time to rest up. Perhaps then that gives them the opportunity to return on Friday, another day in full pads. Maybe you get some of these guys that have missed multiple practices, like Shane Lemieux was absent again today. Kendrick Miller was working off to the side, but was around. We still haven't seen Trajan Jeffcoat after that elbow injury that led to him being carted off early last week. So ideally, the day off maybe gives them a little bit of an opportunity to heal up and a little bit of an opportunity to get some of these guys back. Because, look, I was underwhelmed by the wide receivers rising to the occasion with more wide receivers out. A.T. Perry did not have a strong day. Stanley Morgan Jr. caught a pass, but didn't have the strongest day either. Mason Tipton made another big play downfield, also broke away from a player to get a reception over the middle of the field as well. So not just attacking the deep area of the field, but working into other areas too. Kevin Austin had a couple of times where he was targeted, but wasn't able to come up with those passes. One of them was when Gene Charles tipped the pass and then it bounced off of Kevin Austin and then in the hands of Roderick Teamer. So we just haven't seen, even with Cedric Wilson out, with Equinemius St. Brown out, with Bub Means out, we just didn't see any of those other guys really rise up and grab the bull by the horns and really show out, right? Show you, hey, I deserve to be in the conversation with these other guys when it comes to wide receiver 3. It's still starting to feel like the only person that has kind of risen up to that point is Mason Tipton. But you have to ask about consistency and all these other things when it comes to that, because he's an undrafted free agent rookie. Is he going to be able to string it all together his rookie season at NFL speed? Maybe. Possibly. Don't want to rule that out on him at all. But definitely not something you want to be relying on just in case it doesn't pan out. So seeing one of these other veterans, rise to the occasion would be nice. So we'll see what happens with the day off and if that ends up maybe allowing them to be able to get some help back at the position. But now the biggest name we're going to be watching for a while, along with Marshawn Lattimore now, is Demario Davis. And the good thing is, when it comes to Demario Davis, he ain't got nothing to learn. He's got a lot to teach, though. And so you definitely at least want him out on the field. And so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the Saints end up kind of like taking it a little bit easier with him, right? Like not necessarily rush him out to the point where he's got to go out there and fully participate, but have him go out there instead and do, what it is that he does. Like he often runs into the defensive huddles for the second, third teams and stuff like that, and gives some feedback and like gives them some charge and everything. I loved hearing Colin Saunders yelling from off from the side today when he wasn't on the field, shouting about how like there should be no drop off. There should be no drop off between us and you. Like go out there and make your plays and all this stuff. And that's kind of what Demario Davis does as well. So it was cool to see with Demario Davis off the field that Colin Saunders kind of stepped into that sort of vocal leadership role along with a few others. But it's still something that you're going to miss if you don't have Demario Davis out there. So I think getting him out there as best and as quickly as possible is going to be the most important, one of the most important things of New Orleans Saints training camp moving forward. So we'll see if the day off does them any wonders. Basically, is the big thing that we're going to be looking for. All right, before we wrap up here, make sure you get your questions in the chat so that I can go ahead and grab some questions to answer in tomorrow morning's episode. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to also spend some time looking back at the first full week, right? Full 7 days of practices and things like that. But go ahead and drop your questions, because if I can get some of those answered, I'll get those as well. And if you're catching the show later, you can send me your questions through the Insider program or on your favorite social media. So before we wrap up here, I also want to do our dog of the day. And our dog of the day should be no surprise at all. And it comes down for me today to Alontae Taylor. Alontae Taylor was just outstanding on the field. Made great plays all through those one-on-ones, made great plays in terms of those team drills. Him and Chris Olave going back and forth and everything like that. I don't mind that. I think that that's great. I think that competition breeds excellence. I think that that's exactly what you want to see from those guys, is that they're passionate and going at one another, and that they're showing you that they have, that they can bring it, and whatever that might be. I love seeing all that. So for me, that was dog of the day for me, was Alontae Taylor. Absolutely no doubt about it. I'm super excited to see more of Alontae Taylor as we continue on through training camp, because he just seems very different, just seems very, very different this year, and in a really, really strong place. And that could benefit this New Orleans Saints defense, who needs that kind of energy, especially in the slot in 2024. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL Scouting. Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs breaking down all the biggest stories from around the NFL from a team-building, roster management, and GM standpoint. Really, really smart football talk over there every single Monday through Friday. Go and check it out over at Locked On NFL Scouting. We appreciate you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.